Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about how to find hyperfocal distance for your landscape photography. So I've come out this evening to Curbar Edge. It's a little bit overcast, so I might not get the dramatic sky I was hoping for, but I can still talk about the subject that I want to cover, and that is focusing for landscape photography, and in particular how to find hyperfocal distance. You can focus wherever you like in a landscape image, and it can sometimes be quite cool to have out of focus areas. But in general, it's quite desirable to have a great depth of field and have everything in your scene in focus. So everything from front, if you've got foreground elements, all the way to the back where you might have mountains. If you're going to focus on something in particular, like I said, if you want a creative shot and you want things out of focus, you don't really need to worry about this. But if you do want everything in focus front to back, you're going to need to focus in a particular way to achieve that. And you can do that in different ways, but one of the ways that I want to talk about is hyperfocal distance. So I'm going to head up now, find a good composition, and we'll talk a little bit more about focusing and how to find hyperfocal distance. So first of all, we need to talk about depth of field. And depth of field is how much of your scene is in focus. And that's going to be affected by a number of parameters. So your aperture is going to affect it. If you're using a wide aperture, you're going to get a shallower depth of field. A narrower aperture is going to give you deeper depth of field. And also focal length. A longer focal length is going to give you a narrower or a shallower depth of field. And a shorter focal length will give you a deeper depth of field. And this matters because if you're using a wide aperture or a long focal length or both, and you focus on your foreground subject, it's likely that your background is going to be out of focus. And conversely, if you focus on the background, your foreground might be out of focus. So if we want everything in our scene to be in focus, we need to find a way of doing that. And the hyperfocal distance is a way to ensure that you've got acceptable sharpness from front to back. And we say acceptable sharpness because it's not going to be perfect sharpness. You're kind of making a compromise. You're focusing somewhere in between front and back, and it's giving you a kind of average maximum sharpness overall, if that makes sense. So I'm going to crack on now, get some more shots, and we'll talk a little bit more about hyperfocal distance and how you get it a bit further on. So the hyperfocal distance is a point beyond which everything is in focus right up until infinity in the distance, probably where your mountains are or something. So we have to find that point at which to focus. So you can do that in various methods. You can look at a chart which cross-references aperture and focal length, and then you can find out the distance at which you need to focus. You can use an app like Photo Pills and you put your information into there and it'll come up and give you the point at which to focus. Or one of the easiest methods is to just double the distance of the subject, which is the closest thing that you want to focus on. So let's say this grass here is the subject that I want in my scene to be in focus, which is closest to the camera. I know that the distance from there to there is roughly 3 or 4 meters. So I need to double that to find my focus point. So if I go 3 or 4 meters that direction, I'm probably going to be down at this rock or a little bit further. So I would focus down there on the rock, and that should give me acceptable focus all the way up to the horizon at infinity. So that's how you can find the hyperfocal distance, and it can be really useful to get that front to back sharpness. There are other methods as well. So for example, you can focus on infinity. That's a good method if you've got no foreground detail. If you've got nothing in the foreground, there's no point using the hyperfocal distance method, and you might as well just focus on infinity. So I'm going to wrap up now. The light's going down, it's getting a bit dark. I think I've got some shots I can use. It actually turned out better than I thought with the sky. It is overcast, but I did get some good colours. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you found it useful, just give me a thumbs up down below, that'd be really useful. And if you're new to the channel and you're not yet subscribed and you'd like to do so, you can also click down there on the big red button, and then you'll find out what I'm doing each and every week. There's a new video every Sunday morning at 10 AM UK time. So I hope you'll join me next week for the next one, but until then, thanks a lot everyone, and bye for now.